Hello friends, Ravneet Bhalla presents the most requested video recipe on the channel, gluten-free sourdough starter. So let's start by mixing 2 tablespoons of rice atta with 2 tablespoons of water. Mix well, it will look gooey. Mix until no dry flour is visible. Keep covered at room temperature with a loose lid. Keep it aside for 24 hours, and after 24 hours you can see a few bubbles. A few bubbles is a good sign. That's the right start to our gluten-free sourdough starter recipes. Now you will need a new glass container and stir in 2 tablespoons of rice flour along with 2 tablespoons of water. You will also need 1 teaspoon of the starter from day 1. Now you might ask what to do with the rest of the discard. Well, since it is fermented rice, I choose to apply it on my hair as well as face as a mask. But mind you, dilute it with water else it might stick badly with your skin and hair. Mix the starter again until everything is blended well and rest it at room temperature for 24 hours. The third day, the starter should smell sour. It's a welcome sign. Again, each time you feed your starter, don't forget to stir it fairly well and then scoop out a little of the previous day's starter in a new container and mix with 1 tablespoon of rice atta and 1 tablespoon of water. This time, I have chosen to reduce the amount of flour and water to reduce waste. If you are comfortable adding the gluten-free discard to your dosa or pancakes, you may. Now onwards, if your starter shows bubbles within 12 hours, repeat the feed and discard cycles every 12 hours. Repeat this process until 6 days. Then on the 6th or 7th day, whichever is earlier, whenever you see your starter getting bubbly and smelling a little better, speedier than it was on the previous days, it's a sign that your rice sourdough starter is getting ready. Now let's take a tiny bit of the starter and mix it with 2 tablespoons of rice flour and 2 tablespoons of water. Now you might question why I have again increased the amount of water and flour. Well, the reason is simple. Since my starter is now getting ready and showing signs of a rapid rise, I want to feed it with more nutrition. You will notice that it starts rising faster, remains stable for a good amount of time before it starts to fall. Now feed it before it starts to fall below the feeding line. What do I mean when I say this? You should tie a band on your starter when you feed it at the level at which you feed and then observe its rise. It will rise above the feed line. That's a sign that it is going good. And then observe how much it starts, how much it rises. And then you will need to observe when it starts to fall. You will need to feed it before it falls below the line at which you had fed it earlier. It's very simple. It may look complicated, but it's very simple, my dear friends. I shifted my sourdough starter gluten-free to the refrigerator on the 7th day since it was rising rapidly. In hot conditions, in hot climates, starters tend to rise quickly. If you are in a hot climate, then try to feed it within 12 hours after 2 days when you start the whole process of making sourdough starter gluten-free. And if you are in a cold climate, then it's okay to feed it after 24 hours. So, if you are in India, please feed it after 12 hours every day before shifting it to the refrigerator. Now, the goal is to feed it every third day in the fridge for 2 weeks. Then you can feed it once a week. Keep it in the fridge all the time after feed. Feed it and shift it to the refrigerator. Otherwise, it might start to rise at room temperature and it might get sour quickly. You don't want it to go sour. Feed it and immediately shift it to the refrigerator. You may use the rest in making a gluten-free sourdough bread recipe and use only a tiny bit of the starter for new feed every time. I hope the sourdough starter with gluten-free rice flour was useful. I have already shared a millet sourdough bread recipe on the channel a few days back, and many of you had asked for this gluten-free sourdough starter recipe. That is why I am sharing it here. Please do check out that recipe and try out the bread with the sourdough starter that you will have on the seventh day. I have done exactly that. I have made the millet bread on the seventh day of the sourdough starter. So I hope you find this sourdough starter with gluten-free rice flour useful. If you're comfortable with wheat, please try out the wheat flour sourdough starter. Mine has been extremely well for 2 years. Let's go back to bread baking, friends. When store-bought breads are junk, let's bake a healthy bread. Take care until we meet next. Bye bye. See you soon with yet another healthy recipe.